U.S. And a lot of what we just heard through the news a segment right before this show, we're going to talk a little bit about that because we are going to today talk about something that a lot of people have not heard about, did not learn about. The few people who know about it learned about it way after they graduated high school, probably college. Most people in this country do not know the history we're going to talk about today. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right to it. Today, we are talking about the business plot of 1933. And we're comparing that to what's going on in our country and in our government today. So, what is the business plot of 1933? I'm so glad you asked. This plot is called a bunch of different things. It's called the business plot. It's called the plot against American democracy. It's called the fascist plot to overthrow the FDR government. Called a bunch of different things, but we're going to talk about what really happened, who did what, and what it meant. So we are talking about this from a book written by Jonathan M. Katz. And the book is called Gangsters of Capitalism. Katz details in this book how the authors of the Depression era business plot aimed to take power away from FDR and stop his quote unquote socialist New Deal. That's what they believe the New Deal was about. So Major General Smedley Butler, let me spell it for you because you need to know his name. Smedley, Smedley, Butler, Butler. Now, if you are a current Marine or a former Marine, you know who Smedley Butler is because if you've done Marine cadences, you have literally sang his name. So you know who he is, you know that he's a former Marine, but I guarantee you, you don't know why he is so important to the history of this country and what is going on right now. So General Smedley Butler is talked about, and he is at the center of this book, of this history. And the name of the book by Jonathan Katz is actually, the full title is called Gangsters of Capitalism, Smedley Butler, the Marines, and the Making and Breaking of America's Empire. So Butler, who is a former Marine, like I said, fought in nearly every U.S. overseas war in the early 20th century. In this excerpt, Katz documents how Butler played a pivotal role in equally little known episode in American history in which a cadre of powerful businessmen tried to overthrow the U.S. government in an episode that anticipated, Katz says, the events of January 6, 2021. So Katz says in this expose, he knew a coup when he smelled one. He had been involved in many himself. He had overthrown governments and protected friendly client governments around the world on behalf of some of the same U.S. bankers and lawyers that he was supporting in the work that he was doing, and businessmen, and apparently who are now looking for his help to overthrow the U.S. government. For 33 years and 4 months, Butler had been a United States Marine, a veteran of nearly every overseas conflict back to the war against Spain in 1898. Respected by his peers, beloved by his men, he was known as the Fighting Hell Devil Marine, or Old Gimlet Eye, or the Leathernecked Friend, and the famous Fighting Quaker of the Devil Dogs, the Marines. I'm sorry about all those ridiculous nicknames, but I didn't make them up. The Marine Corps did. So there you go. Best-selling books had been written about Butler. Hollywood adored him. President Roosevelt's cousin, the late Theodore Roosevelt himself, was said to have called Butler, quote, the ideal American soldier, end quote. Over the course of his career, he had received the Army and Navy Distinguished Service Medals, the French Ordre de l'Étoile Noire, and in the distinction that would ensure his place in the Marine Corps pantheon, the Medal of Honor, twice. But Butler knew what most Americans did not, that in all those years, he and his Marines had destroyed democracies and helped put into power the Hitlers and Mussolinis of Latin America, dictators like the Dominican Republic's Rafael Trujillo and Nicaragua's soon-to-be leader at that time, Anastasio Somoza, men who would employ violent repression and their US-created militaries. I didn't say US-backed. Katz did not say US-backed. He said US-created militaries to protect investments and their own power. He had done so on behalf of moneyed interests like Citibank, JP Morgan, and the Wall Street financier Grayson M.P. Murphy. And now, a bond salesman who worked for Murphy was pitching Butler on a domestic operation that set off the old veterans' alarm bells. The bond salesman in question was Gerald C. McGuire, a 37-year-old Navy veteran with a head Butler thought looked like a cannonball. McGuire had been pursuing Butler relentlessly through 1933 and 1934, starting with visits to the Butler's converted farmhouse on Philadelphia's main line in Newark, where Butler was attending the reunion of National Guard Division. McGuire showed up at his hotel room and tossed a wad of cash on the bed. $18,000, he said. And in that time, that might as well have been a million. In early 1934, Butler had received a series of postcards from McGuire sent from the hot posts of fascist Europe, including Hitler's Berlin. So let me just make sure you're keeping up with me here. This person had gone to all of the fascist places in Europe, went to Berlin, the headquarters of Hitler's Germany, yes, and sent postcards back to Butler. It's like the lynchers in this country sending postcards of lynching to their family members around the country. That's okay. Let's go on. In August 1934, McGuire called Butler from Philadelphia and asked to meet. Butler suggested an abandoned cafe at the back of the lobby of the Bellevue Stratford Hotel. First, McGuire recounted all he had seen in Europe. He learned that Mussolini and Hitler were able to stay in power because they kept soldiers on their payrolls in various ways. Quote, but that setup would not suit us at all, end quote, the businessman opined. But in France, McGuire had, quote, found just exactly the organization we're going to have, end quote. That organization in France was called the Croix de Feu, F-E-U, or Fiery Cross. It was like a more militant version of the American Legion, an association of French World War veterans and paramilitaries. On February 6, 1934, 6 weeks before McGuire went to France, the Croix de Feu had taken part in a riot of mainly far-right and fascist groups that had tried to storm the French legislature. The insurrection was stopped by police. At least 15 people, mostly rioters, were killed, but in the aftermath, France's center-right prime minister had been forced to resign in favor of a conservative. McGuire had attended a meeting of the Croix de Feu in Paris. It was the sort of super organization he believed Americans could get behind, especially with a beloved war hero like Butler at the helm. So then McGuire made his proposal. The Marine, Smedley Butler, would lead 500,000 veterans in a march on Washington, blending the Croix de Feu's assault on the French legislature with the March on Rome that had put Mussolini's fascisti in power in Italy a decade earlier. They would be financed and armed by whom? By some of the most powerful corporations in America, including DuPont, the nation's biggest manufacturer of explosives and synthetic materials. That's right, y'all. They just did not create paint. The purpose of the action was to stop Roosevelt's New Deal, the president's program to end the Great Depression, which one of the millionaire DuPont brothers deemed, quote, nothing more or less than the socialistic doctrine called by another name, end quote. Butler's veteran army, McGuire explained, would pressure the president to appoint a new Secretary of State or a Secretary of General Affairs who would take on the executive powers of government. Okay, we following me? They wanted to appoint somebody who would act as the executive power, who would be the executive power, and would take that away from the presidency. If Roosevelt went along, he would be allowed to remain as a figurehead. And that might seem laughable, except for that's exactly what happened in Italy, you see. When Mussolini came to power with his fascisti, the only reason the king survived was because he went along with it. And that's why he stayed in the position of quote unquote king, but he had no power. All of the power belonged to Mussolini. That's what McGuire wanted to do in the United States. Now, how many of you knew that Italy had a king while Mussolini was in power? Because all we ever talk about is Mussolini. Anyway, otherwise, Roosevelt would have been forced to resign, placing the new super secretary in the White House. Butler recognized this immediately as a coup. I mean, he knew the people who were allegedly behind it, and he had made a life in the overlapping seams of capital and empire. And he knew that the subversion of democracy by force had turned out to be a required part of the job he had chosen. And here comes the famous Smedley Butler quote that you should know, that you don't, that you had better not forget from this day forward. Smedley Butler said of himself, quote, I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street, and for the bankers. Butler would write a year later in his own memoir, in short, he said, I was a racketeer for capitalism, end quote. And Butler knew another thing that most Americans didn't, how much they would suffer if anyone did to their democracy, the alleged democracy. Again, these are not my words. These are Jonathan Katz's words from the excerpt from his book. I'm literally reading to you what he wrote, and we'll talk about a little bit of this in a minute. But Jonathan Katz says that Butler said that he knew that Americans would suffer if anyone did to this so-called democracy what he had done to so many others across the globe. That's right, y'all. All of these other countries that this government and this media has been telling you are not democracies. They're socialist regimes. They're dictatorial despots. The leaders are dictators and they're despots and they're communists. And communism and socialism is equal to fascism, and they're all all a lie. It always has been a lie. And Smedley Butler knew it, because Smedley Butler himself admitted to destroying democracies around the world. And then he realized when the same thing was being planned for this country, then he realized, oh my God, what have I done? And I can't let that happen here. All right, so let's go on. Now about this super organization, McGuire asked the general, would you be interested in heading it? I'm interested in it, but I do not know about heading it, Butler told the bond salesman McGuire as he resolved to report everything he had learned to Congress. Yeah. I'm very greatly interested in it because, you know, Jerry, my one hobby is maintaining a democracy. If you get these 500,000 soldiers advocating anything smelling of fascism, I am going to get 500,000 more and lick the hell out of you, and we will have a real war right at home. Those are Smedley Butler's words that he testified to in front of Congress and wrote in his memoirs about these meetings that he had with McGuire. 8 decades after Butler publicly revealed his conversations about what became known as the business plot, Smedley Butler is oddly no longer a household name. A few history buffs, like your host, and a not inconsiderable number of conspiracy theory enthusiasts, remember Butler for his whistleblowing of the alleged fascist coup. Another repository of his memory is kept among modern day Marines who remember. I told you, learn one detail of his life in boot camp, just one, and that's the 2 medals of honor that he earned. And they learned to sing his name along with those of his legendary Marine contemporaries, Dan Daly and Louis Chesty Puller, in a running cadence about devotion to the core. It was good for Smedley Butler, and it's good enough for me. That's not how it goes, because I've forgotten how to march and that kind of stuff in cadence. But I almost joined the Marine Corps, and that is how I know who Smedley Butler was. That's why his name was always familiar to me, because I learned that cadence before I went down to the induction center in Baltimore for the U.S. Marine Corps, and then ended up not signing the contract. Thank God. But anyway, enough about me. More about Smedley Butler. I am talking to you about this today because Smedley Butler and the business plot of 1933 needs to be household names and common knowledge now more than ever to understand why Elon Musk is being allowed to do what he is doing to the government, why the tech bosses are all on board, why corporations are following suit without being given direct orders from anybody in the executive office, and why boycotts will probably not fix this, even if we do need to stop giving these fascist pigs our hard-earned money, and we absolutely do, and not just Target and Walmart. So, the business plot, or also called the White House Putsch, Putsch, of 1933, was an alleged conspiracy by wealthy business leaders and right-wing figures to overthrow President Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, and install a fascist-style government. While the full extent of the plot remains debated, despite the documentation that exists through, Katz and his book and essays he's written and other books about it, it reflected a deep opposition to FDR's New Deal, this plot, which sought to regulate big business, strengthen labor rights, and expand social welfare. And right before this show, dear listeners, what did you hear on the news segment? Trump is signing an executive order to end collective bargaining, labor rights in the federal government. No regulation for big business, because big business is the government now. And actually, big business has been the government for a long time. Trump didn't just do this with the creation of Doge and the appointment he wasn't even appointed Elon Musk. There's no appointment. He's just there doing stuff. He came for the weekend and he won't leave. He's one of those kind of guests, right? So corporations have big business has controlled U.S. government for a minute now, and it was happening before Citizens United too. Woo, we got to talk about that one day, and why Citizens United was not the beginning, was not the beginning of corporate control of the U.S. government. That's another show for another day. Let's get back into this and expand social welfare. That's what the New Deal was supposed to do. And look at the attacks. They're about to do something horrible to Social Security. Elon Musk is calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme. That's my money that I work for. When I work My money for my retirement gets taken out of my paycheck and put into the Social Security fund so that when I retire, I will be able to take that money that I worked and earned and paid into my Social Security for so that I can get that money and do whatever the heck I want with it in my retirement. And Elon Musk, the richest, if not one of the richest, if not the richest man on the planet, is calling it a Ponzi scheme. How, how, how is he able to enjoy peace? I do not understand. And I'm just going to leave that right there. So let's talk about the comparisons to the 1933 business plot and what is going on today to help you understand why we're even bothering talking about this. Because in today's political climate, we have elite opposition to progressive reforms, right? We know that. And by elite, I don't mean, I actually don't like the word elite because it suggests that these people are somehow better than the rest of it. They're just rich. They're just rich people. They just have money. And yes, it's true that because they have most of the money, they have power, but that does not make them elite. That does not make them better than anybody else. It doesn't make them better than working people. They're not smarter than us. They didn't get that money because they worked harder than us. They didn't get that money because they are smarter than us. They did not get that money because they have better business acumen. That they got that money through fascist oppression. And this is what I am showing you right now. So today we understand that the corporate class, that's what I prefer to call them because they're not elite in anything other than repression and evil. The corporate class hates progressive reform. It is true today, but it is as true today as it was in 1933, when corporate leaders from DuPont, JP Morgan, and other industrialists feared that FDR's policies would undermine their power. Some reportedly exploit the coup to install an authoritarian leader, and they were hoping the leader would be Smedley Butler. This is why McGuire went to Butler with this plan, hoping that Butler would take the leadership position because they wanted to impose him as the super secretary of domestic affairs and put him in the White House. And Butler was like, "Nuh-uh, I've seen what happens when we do this in other countries. We can't allow this here." But see, he had already done this horrible thing to other people in so many other countries, and we are still dealing with the fallout of what Smedley Butler did today. Okay, I'm going to prove it to you in a minute. The purpose of the action was to stop Roosevelt's New Deal, the president's program to end the Great Depression, which one of the millionaire DuPont brothers said was, nothing more than socialism, like we said before. And we have today corporate interests and wealthy donors like the Koch network, tech billionaires who lobby against progressive policies like taxing the rich, their fair share, Medicare for all, climate solutions and regulations. Some right-wing figures like Steve Bannon and the entire GOP and a whole bunch of the Democratic Party, stop thinking they're not right-wing, have flirted with authoritarian rhetoric. And now today, they're not flirting with it. They're just they are making t-shirts. They continue to oppose any policies that would benefit the working class and poor, particularly Black, Indigenous, and other people that they have marginalized. And I think I would like for us, and I am practicing doing this myself, to stop saying marginalized people, because it's not like people being marginalized just happens. It's not an organic kind of thing, right? People are not born and they're automatically just pushed on the outside of society, not able to access any kind of opportunity to it. No, that's not how that works. People in power decided that certain people should be pushed to the margins of society and not receive full benefit of citizenship or human rights. So the corporate class, the capitalist class, the dictatorship of finance capital, they marginalize us and continue to push and push us to the margins and punish us for being marginalized by them. Also, there is the political polarization and threats to democracy that we can see in 1933 and that we can see in right now. In 1933, the US was deeply divided between left-wing populism of FDR, which is what people claimed Biden's administration was and his policies were, and as much as I do not want to give FDR as much credit as people give him for being so wonderful, because he had problems just like every other president, but Joseph Biden was not even an FDR. And I was even a little insulted that people said that about Joe Biden. Like, his policies were not anywhere near New Deal. Oh my gosh. That just let me know how little people know about legislative history in this country. And I don't mean like obscure kind of stuff either. Everybody should know about the New Deal because everybody should want some more of that, right? But because of the hatred of communism and socialism in this country, you're not taught about the New Deal. And the funny thing is, the New Deal isn't even socialism. It's just progressivism. And there's levels to this, y'all. But okay, let me not get off track. So there's the left-wing populism of FDR and the right-wing reactionaries, who were the business elites and some members of the military. Democracy was under strain globally because of the rise of Hitler and Mussolini, and the US was also deeply divided over racial issues. Race riots and lynchings were common during this time period, with many victims of lynching being Black servicemen returning from World War I who were assaulted or murdered in their uniforms as they returned home from fighting for so-called freedom abroad, only to have none at home. White Americans were so deeply and violently opposed to Black equality that they carried out these violent attacks, supported them either through silence or attending the lynchings, or supported the lynchers in court. Today, the US faces extreme polarization with Trump's, stop the steal movement from his first administration, the January 6th insurrection, growing authoritarian tendencies of the GOP and the Democratic Party, that if you didn't see what the Biden-Harris administration did to the anti-genocide protests and protesters in his administration last year, if you don't recognize what those people did to us as fascism, you are being very dishonest. I don't know how to say that any other way at this point. You're just choosing not to admit that Democrats rely on fascism to control people as well. Why? Because Democrats are avowed capitalists. They are a part of the corporate class. Do you understand? So they're not going to use anything but fascism to control the people who oppose their cash cow. They're just not, because that's how capitalists roll. Capitalists always resort to fascism in order to maintain their power and control. It has never not been so in the history of the existence of capitalism. All right. So it is Democrats and their policies capitulating to capitalism over progressive policies that causes the strain between the people and the alleged opposition party, because they don't alleviate the pressure that the GOP policies impose on people. And people are beginning to notice that the Democrats don't alleviate that pressure, and they use the same brutal fascist tactics as the GOP uses to shut us up. All right, now we are 30 minutes past the hour, and that means it is time for a WPFW station break. So, our esteemed engineer, let's go.
WPFW presents Still We Rise, our 48th anniversary celebration on Friday, April 25th. 7 to 11 p.m. at Martin's Crosswinds in Greenbelt. Entertainment includes Navasha Dea and more. That's Still We Rise, WPFW's 48th anniversary celebration. Details at WPFWFN.org.
On Sunday, March 30th at 6 p.m. at the National Press Club, the Emmett Till Legacy Foundation presents the Women of Courage Awards Gala in honor of Mamie Till, women who exemplify the strength, resilience, and courage of Mamie Till Mobley. Activist ancestor Dora Ladner and her sister Joyce are among 18 honorees who embody Mamie Till Mobley's unwavering courage that ignites the civil rights movement and continues to inspire generations today. Details at Eventbrite under Women of Courage Awards Gala. WPFW, building a better world, one broadcast at a time.
Absolutely fantastic event that is going to take place this Sunday. I will be in attendance because I will be honoring and celebrating and cheering on my comrade, Jaribu Hill, who is a force of nature and an amazing, amazing person. So I'm really excited about this award event this Sunday. And tonight, if you are in Baltimore, please go to BAP Baltimore's Instagram page and register for their teach-in tonight at 709 North Howard Street in Baltimore, Maryland. It is Groundings with Our Sisters, Africans Against Imperialism. Oops, I shouldn't have said one of those things I said, apologize. But all African people are welcome to this space, no matter your gender identity. Tonight, 6:30, 709 North Howard Street, Baltimore, Maryland. Go to BAP Baltimore's Instagram page to get the link to register. And tomorrow, go to BAP DC's Instagram page to get the link to register for Arms of Empire gentrification in DC at Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ at 5301 North Capitol Street Northeast in DC. Doors open at 1:30 for both events. Masks required and will be provided. So will food and childcare. Tomorrow's event is from 2 to 4 p.m. That is for your listening pleasure. Govern yourselves accordingly, y'all. Let's get back to this business plot stuff. Goodness gracious, this is wild. How prescient it all is to what's going on today. So now one of the other things that we can compare to the political situation in 1933 and what's going on today is media and disinformation. In 1933, right-wing media like William Hearst's newspapers, and you all, I need you all, dear listeners, and all of you watching Lukman Nation on Black Liberation Media, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever you're watching and listening, I need you to look up William Randolph Hearst's newspapers to find out how many newspapers he owned and controlled around the country, to really get an understanding of how expansive the right-wing propaganda was in the country at the time. You have to understand how many newspapers Hearst controlled to understand why it's important that media at the time, which was not the behemoth that it is today, but you need to understand why disinformation being spread in the media in 1933 was so important. Because William Randolph Hearst and other media, newspapers in the country at the time, it was mostly newspapers and a few, small circulars at the time in 1933, they all called FDR a socialist or a traitor to his class, right? How come capitalists don't have a problem calling people who they think should be in alignment with them, who end up not being in some way or another? Because it's not like FDR was not a capitalist. Let's be clear. FDR was not a socialist. He wasn't trying to implement socialism. That man really just wanted to end the Great Depression because he didn't want a people's revolt on his hands. And he knew that he had to do something to alleviate the suffering of the people that the very capitalists who were trying to coup him created. Because you know the Great Depression was the fault of the capitalist class, right? Yes. So FDR, in seeing the suffering of Americans through no fault of their own, he's like, I got to do something because everybody is destitute. This is insane. And the few things he proposes to do, the capitalists called it socialism. And then they took to their capitalist friends who owned the media, and they crafted and distributed a narrative of FDR as a socialist, anti-American, not having American values, and a traitor to his class. Why come we leftists can't just call folks traitors to the working class? Because that's what you are if you're not standing shoulder to shoulder, elbow to elbow, marching lockstep, arm in arm with the working class, fighting for our human rights and dignity. If you're not on this side of the barricade with us, guess what you are? You are our traitor. I said it. Okay, let's keep going. Today, right-wing media like Fox News, Newsmax, social media influencers amplify conspiracy theories. And I know I'm going to say this and people are going to be like, but it doesn't exist. The whole deep state thing, it's not deep, y'all. It's not a secret. There is nothing they are doing in secret anymore. And I'm not saying that just because Hegseth put the plans to bomb Yemen on signal. That's not there. The corporate class, the dictatorship of finance capital has been controlling the US government. I had another image of my mind of a puppet and where a puppeteer's hand goes, but I couldn't think of a polite way to say that, so I didn't. So I just had to say that the dictatorship of finance capital has controlled this government for decades. And it has not been a secret. We have talked about it in the past few weeks on this show. We talked about, and that wasn't even the start of it. I just wanted to make a point that Democrats are complicit in this mess too. They're the reason we are in this mess as well by highlighting Bill Clinton's policies. But we're talking about businesses and corporations using the constitutional amendment. What was it, the 14th Amendment? Using the 14th Amendment not to protect voting rights for Black people, but to protect corporate interests. Yeah, ever since the amendment was passed, that amendment has been used to protect more corporations than it has been used to protect Black folks. So, I don't believe there is such a thing as a deep state. It's just the state and everybody who benefits from the state existing as it does. I'm not saying that there are not people and entities that you don't know about who are involved, but that doesn't mean that they're keeping it a secret. That doesn't mean that there is a system behind the system. No, the system that is doing all of these things to us, we see it. It's right there. It is public. All right. They come out in the daylight, y'all. And then, of course, the great replacement theory. There is not a concerted plan of all of the Black and brown people around the world to have more babies to outpopulate the white. This is what the people actually believe. That's what they believe the great replacement is. It is an intentional effort by non-European descended people to literally procreate Europeans out of existence, or at least out of power, so they think. Nobody is planning to do that. Nobody among the working class and poor. We, the Black and brown people of the world, we're not plotting to procreate ourselves into power. You know who is planning to do that, though? The right wing. What do you think all this anti-abortion stuff is about? All of this anti-queer, anti-trans, anti anything other than traditional marriage, anti anything other than traditional gender roles, anti-feminism, it's because they are trying to indoctrinate more white women to have more babies, because white women are not having as many babies as they were having before. Why? Why, you wonder? It's the economy, stupid. Babies are expensive. Children are expensive. And if your adult self cannot afford eggs, then I think people really understand, if I can't afford to feed myself eggs, I know I cannot feed a child, right? So people are making informed decisions not to have children, either until they become financially stable, and then 20 years later they realize they ain't gonna never be financially stable in this system, or they just decide they're never going to have children at all, because climate change is almost going to guarantee that their children may not survive. Do you understand? The capitalist class has created an environment, has created a reality where people in society are afraid that their children will not be able to survive the next 50 years, because they think the planet will be overrun by climate catastrophe. And how can you not think that when you're looking at things that are going on related to climate disasters right now? And when we understand that it is the US military and the capitalist class around the world that is the biggest producer of climate impacting emissions and pollution, and it's not working class and poor people, particularly not in underdeveloped countries, that are contributing to climate change, well, yeah, I guess the capitalists are trying to force people that they want to procreate more. This is why, and I'm going off on a little tangent here, but give me a little bit of leeway. This is why I'm very suspicious of these population control programs pushed by Bill Gates and folks like that. It's not because they're concerned about overpopulation. Overpopulation of the planet is not a problem. It's not an issue. If there are entire swaths of this country alone, smack dab in the middle of this country, where ain't nothing but land, and it's 18 people, cows, and other livestock, but it's mostly land, the rest of the world looks like that too. Most of the people live in major metropolitan areas on the coasts of countries near waterways, but there's a lot, an incredible amount, probably an immeasurable amount, but I'm not sure. I'm sure somebody's measured just how much uninhabited land there is in the world. There is no overpopulation problem. This overpopulation business is a capitalist scheme to control the population of people that they do not want to overprocreate. They want to control the population of working class, poor, and oppressed Black, brown, indigenous, non-European people, and they want the Europeans to have as many babies as they can. That's what all of this mess is about. Well, not all, but all of the stuff that has anything to do with gender or sexuality or relationships or marriage or children. That's what it's about. It literally is about forcing white women to have more children to keep white capitalists in power. Okay, so let me get back to this. Today in right-wing media, as they're spreading their conspiracy theories that we're all wanting to just have a bunch of babies to get rid of them. I'm not sure how they think that's going to happen. But okay, anyway, they demonize progressive leaders. And I would argue, I don't think there are any progressive leaders in Congress anymore, because don't make me say things. Don't make me say what I want to say about AOC, but let me just suffice it to say that the accusations of her being insincere from the very beginning have proven to be true. And don't make me say anything about Bernie Sanders, because I cannot do it without saying words that are going to get the station in trouble. So let me move on. So-called liberal media also disparages progressives and leftists, calling us Putin's puppets, agents, or bots of Russia. Russiagate was a whole lie created to disparage us and discredit us from telling the truth about Clinton's campaign and the 2016 election and all of that, and how she did not campaign, and how she could have won, but she felt entitled, and how she was the one who gave Trump all of that free publicity, thinking that if she exposed how stupid he was, people wouldn't vote for him. But, just like typical Democrats, they just don't believe that Americans are as deeply indoctrinated and very prone to love themselves some fascists too. Anyway, and yeah, so, liberal media calls us puppets of Xi Jinping or Assadists for opposing U.S. interference in or against any other country. Like we said that the U.S. should leave Syria alone. Assad didn't do anything. He did not do what he was accused of doing. He didn't gas his own people. That was a lie. And for telling the truth, for saying that, we were called Assadists and all kinds of stuff. That's happening right now in this country. That is not that different from what was going on in 1933 with the right-wing propaganda spread by corporate media then. Democrats and Republicans today openly say that they hate socialism, Marxism, anything that's not capitalism. Even though they honestly, I really do. I know your average American doesn't know what socialism, capitalism, or Marxism or communism are, other than you think that socialism, Marxism, and communism are evil and anti-American, because that's what the capitalist class has told you they are. But I'm becoming more convinced. Well, actually, no, I am convinced that they know what capitalism, what socialism, Marxism, and communism are. They just don't want you to have them. Because if you understood that those things were not what they say, you would actually want them. Because who doesn't want guaranteed housing? Who doesn't want to not have to worry about, I need to get a job that pays me enough money to pay rent somewhere so I don't live on the street. And if I can't make enough money on one job, then I just have to get 2 or 3 and work myself to death so that I don't, have to sleep on the street every night. Wouldn't you like to not live in a society where people are faced with that choice? People who live in socialist and communist society, they don't have to worry about that because the government ensures that all of its citizens have housing because it's a human right. Same thing with education. Same thing with access to food. Same thing with having a clean and healthy environment. Same thing with access to healthcare. Wouldn't you like for the government to provide these things for you so that you don't have to stress and work yourself to a heart attack and an early grave trying to earn enough money to keep a roof over your head, to keep food on your table, to keep clothes on your back, to be able to go to the doctor to the doctor when something is wrong, and to send your kid to somebody's school? Wouldn't you like to live in a society in which those things are not connected to your ability to earn a so-called living? Wouldn't you like to live in a society where you don't have to earn the right to live in a dignified way or earn the right to live at all? That's the whole point behind socialism and communism. That nobody has an advantage over another person because of what they own, that the government's responsibility is to ensure the human rights are met for each of its citizens, housing, healthcare, education, clean environment, access to food, all those kind of things. And of course, because people are people and bureaucracy is what it is, yeah, there are issues, there are contradictions in every system, and there is no such thing as a purely socialist or communist country anywhere in the world. But as principles for economic development and for ordering society in order to meet the needs of the people, a redistributive system is what is needed. That's socialism, communism. That's not capitalism. Capitalism is a system of whomever can make the most money wins. That literally is it. Whoever makes and has the most money, or whoever can steal the most money, they win. We've been living in this system. This is the system we live in. And what do we get from them winning? Be clear that Democrats have openly called themselves proud capitalists and Zionists. Biden and Pelosi chief among them. And of course, we've got the economic inequality and populist backlash. In 1933, the Great Depression fueled mass unrest, which is what FDR was trying to stop. His New Deal was a response to rising socialist and labor, the socialist and labor movements that grew in the 30s. They were in response to the Great Depression. People were demanding socialism because they knew what socialism was. They knew it was the government's responsibility to take care of the needs of its citizens. They knew the government wasn't doing it, and they demanded that the government do it right now. So that's why the New Deal was implemented. And no, the New Deal was not socialism. FDR was not a socialist. They were progressive policies. So what happens in this country is politicians sometimes will pass legislation that will take a little bit of the pressure off, just a little bit. Think of a pressure cooker. And the button that you push to release the steam, to release the pressure from what's in the pressure cooker, that's what the Democrats do. That's what the liberals do in the system in this country. They won't pass legislation that will actually address the entire issue. They won't do anything to fix the actual problem. They will pass legislation to release a little bit of the pressure so that the kettle doesn't explode. That's what the New Deal was. So in my estimation, the New Deal was a half measure because FDR allowed it to be implemented according to the whims of the states. That was the negotiation. That was the deal. A lot of the congressmen didn't want to vote for it because it was a bunch of progressive policies that they didn't want to. But the deal was, okay, fine. You can implement these policies in your states how you want to. But you do have to implement the policies. But you can tweak them. So you know what happened. You know what happened. Black people were left out of some of the New Deal policies, like Social Security. And that wasn't done by blatantly denying benefits to Black people, though, right? It wasn't like, in the states, the mayors and not the mayors, the governors and the legislators in the state said, all right, we're implementing the Social Security program, but you Negroes, you can't have it. You can't have it. No, that's not what they did. It was a slick sleight of hand that they did to exclude agricultural and domestic workers from participating in the Social Security program and from receiving benefits through Social Security. And there were plenty of white people who filled those roles during that time, for sure. But for Black men and women, those were most of the jobs that we had back then. The only ones most of us could get: tenant farming, sharecropping, working as domestics. So all of those people were excluded from Social Security benefits. And today, of course, wealth inequality rivals that of the Gilded Age. Movements like Occupy Wall Street echo the 1930s populism, while Trump's MAGA-based rallies against elites, though often in really weird, contradictory ways. They're not really against the elites, against the capitalists, but it's very strange. But Democrat policies don't help. And then, of course, there is the involvement of military and law enforcement and their loyalty to the state and the system as it exists. In 1933, Smedley Butler exposed the coup plot, showing military loyalty to this idea of democracy. Butler seemed to have transformed from a gangster for capital to opposing it partially because of the bonus army. And this is a great moment to just stop, take a breath, And I want to instruct you all, dear listeners, and all of you watching, that now you have to look up the bonus army. I want you to look up the bonus army and understand why they were so important to not just history in general, but to the history of this plot to overthrow the US government under FDR. This is very, very important history for us to understand how we got to where we are, why we never changed course, and who we are supposed to be fighting. Who we're supposed to be fighting. We're not clear on that. I'm trying to get us clear, but unfortunately, as is always the case, we never have enough time here on Darker Than Blue. We are out of time for Darker Than Blue, but those of you who are watching, and if you're listening, go on over to Black Liberation Media on YouTube, on Facebook, Lukeman Nation on Instagram, and hang out with us on the Dark Room, where we're going to go deeper and darker into this history of Smedley Butler, this business plot, the bonus army, and who we need to be fighting now. But until next week, y'all, thank you so much for watching. This is Jackie Lukeman. This is Darker Than Blue. A luta continua. The struggle continues, but I promise you, if we keep struggling, if we keep telling the truth, victory is certain. Victoria acerta. See you next time. All right. Hey, y'all. How y'all doing? I hope you all are doing well. I hope you can still hear me because my audio be freaking me out sometimes. Let's see. Oh, see, I forgot. I prepared a little thing for you. Let me do my little thing. Hold on. Okay, I love that song. I love that song so much. Abdus picked a great song. He was really, really good at picking music. So let's go more into this history of the bonus army and its connection to the business plot, because this is very important, actually. And thank you all for joining. I appreciate you hanging out with me for my little extra here in the dark room. Usually I try to have a little bit of an extra show because that hour on Darker Than Blue, it is never enough time. And so I kind of figured I had to do something to keep going through, all of this information that I have. So I figured, okay, let me just do another show. Let me just do another show after my show. How about that? So that's welcome to the dark room, where, yes, it is definitely darker in here. And we do go deeper into the things that we talk about on Darker Than Blue. So let's continue with this conversation about the bonus army. On July 17th, 1932, thousands of World War I veterans converged on Washington, D.C., set up tent camps, and demanded immediate payment of bonuses due to them according to the World War Adjusted Compensation Act of 1924. Under that bill, the bonuses were due no earlier than 1925 and all no later than 1945. Walter W. Waters, a former Army sergeant, led his bonus army. That's why they were called the bonus army. They were members of the army. They created their own army to go after their bonus. So they were the bonus army. And Smedley Butler supported their cause and spoke to the group. Butler was retired at the time, but was still a popular military figure who was highly respected by officers and enlisted men alike. A few days after Butler's arrival, President Herbert Hoover ordered the marchers removed, and U.S. Army cavalry troops under the command of General Douglas MacArthur destroyed their camps. And let me explain to you what destroyed meant. An active duty military unit led by General Douglas MacArthur came in to the bonus army encampment. They literally did set up tents in front of the White House. And the White House, it was just a big kind of pastoral kind of thing. Everything that existed around that White House that exists now didn't exist then. So it was the White House in a big old field, and they all camped out. It was a big old encampment of Army veterans demanding their bonus. Herbert Hoover ordered MacArthur to shut them down. MacArthur brought his troops in and they shot people. They set the encampment on fire. And people died in the fire. Yeah, that's what Douglas MacArthur. So when people celebrate that dude, so the move, though, backfired on Hoover because it gained support for his opponent, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in the upcoming election. Now, Butler had self-described as a Republican up until then, but he responded to the treatment of the bonus army by throwing his support behind Roosevelt in the 1932 U.S. presidential election. Another thing that's important to know about the bonus army, very much like the labor movement that was happening at the time that we just talked about, that was in response to not just the Great Depression, but of, the capitalist class using fascist repression against them as they were demanding better pay and better conditions on their jobs. They were organizing for better working conditions, for more respect for workers. What did the capitalists do? They called the army on strikers, from the railroad strikes to what was it, the really famous, the shirtwaist factory fire that started a wave of labor organizing among women and children workers in these the industrial textile mills back in that organizing. It was in response to the deplorable conditions and the really shitty pay people were getting, but also workers were responding to the way the corporate bosses would pit groups of American and immigrant workers and white and black workers against each other to keep them all poor. Right? Like the capitalists would intentionally pay the white workers more money than they paid everybody else. And then when the other people realize, how come they getting paid more than we're getting paid? We're doing worse, more work that is more dangerous than them. Then it became a fight. But the workers realized, wait a minute, we're mad at the wrong people. We shouldn't be mad at the immigrant workers because it's not their fault that they're getting paid more than we are. It's the boss's fault. And the immigrant workers realized, wait a minute, these Negroes, because it's not like they were our friends, but I think they just kind of realized, wait a minute, they haven't done anything to us. And from the way I see it, they get treated pretty shitty. I think our problem is with the bosses. And we do know that people in some other countries have a little bit more political understanding than we do. So I don't doubt that's how it went at all. Not all of the time, but this is how labor organizing came to be. It's how it coalesced. It's how it was, and it wasn't always organic. People had to be convinced. You have more in common with me than you do with the bosses. And everybody was not convinced. But there was some kind of consciousness that was raised among these workers who realized, maybe my problem is not the Black folks. Maybe my problem is not the Irish. Maybe my issue is not these Ofays over here. Maybe all of our problem is the bosses. And some of those workers got together with each other and compared notes and said, you know what? Yep, you're right. I think we need to work together to get them to treat us all right. That's what was going on at this time. This kind of across class, not across class, across race labor organizing that was happening at the same time the Red Scare was going on, Red Summer rather was going on. But yes, at the same time, the Red Scare was happening, where a lot of Black people, a lot of radical Black people who were anti-war and anti-imperialist were getting accused of being communists, getting thrown in prison, getting deported because they're opposed to war. Going on at the same time that this amazing interracial labor organizing is happening, not just interracial, but cross ethnicities, cross nationalities going on, rising. You've got former military, this bonus army veterans who had not been paid their bonuses by the government, and the bonus army was interracial. All of that racism and segregation and all of that bullshit that was happening that the US military was doing in foreign countries. And people in other countries are like, what do you mean you can't eat in the same no, come eat with us. You know what I mean? All of that bullshit that the US military was doing to Black soldiers in foreign theaters, they come back here and the white soldiers and the Black soldiers ain't getting their bonuses paid by the US government, the US military, the Pentagon. So the white soldiers and the Black soldiers was like, fuck this. Let's roll on the government. And that's what they did. They got together, they literally marched on Washington, pitched their tents in front of that White House and said, we are not leaving until you give us our bonuses. So all of this unrest and the Great Depression was happening. And there was all of this, people were starting to connect all of these things to the Great Depression and why the capitalists had plenty of money, but everybody else didn't have none. So the New Deal arose out of that environment. And I'm not trying to sit here and say that there was any one thing that was more important that caused Roosevelt to do the draft and pass the New Deal policies. It was all of those things. It was everything. It was a country bursting at the seams of division, unrest, and honestly, the natural outcome of a country that is established on pan-European settler colonial genocide and enslavement. I mean, what else you think was going to happen when you... Anyway, so I don't know what is going on over here in the chat. Wait a minute. What the hell? What are y'all doing? What is happening? What is talking about? I don't know what you all are doing, but y'all calm down and behave yourselves over there, please, so we can have a good time with this show. So that was the bonus army. And the bonus army existed in that context in this country. So all of those things going on at the same time, Roosevelt was like, I have got to keep this country from falling apart. Now, we done had one civil war. I am sure Roosevelt is sitting there thinking, we have had one civil war. We can't have another one. And I would imagine that it kind of looked like could happen. I think this country was probably closer to another civil war around this time that we're talking about than at any other time. I guess with the exception of now. But anyway, okay, so that's what was going on here. So by 1933, Butler started publicly denouncing capitalism. Y'all, this is the kind of thing we're talking about when we talk about, I shouldn't say we, I should attribute the concept to the person who taught it to us, Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney talked about class suicide. committing crime. When he talked about it, he was talking about it in the context of academia, right? And he was saying that basically all academics are enemies of the people until they prove themselves otherwise, commit class suicide, and work on behalf of the people. So Smedley Butler, I think he is a really good example of exactly that. Smedley Butler, a gangster for capitalism his entire career, realized finally that capitalism is the devil. I have been doing the devil's work. Capitalism is no, but it's interesting that he didn't have that epiphany until the natural consequence of capitalism showed up or threatened to show up here. It was fine when he was carrying the gospel of capitalism and capitalist domination to countries around the world. We're going to talk about those countries in a minute. And what those countries were, so you understand why this is so important and why we are still doing the work in these very countries to this day because of what Smedley Butler did for the US government. So he started publicly denouncing capitalism and bankers. He said that he had once been a high-class muscle man for Wall Street, the bankers and big businesses, labeling himself as a racketeer for capitalism, and that he now wished to make amends for his past actions. That's what he said, Smedley Butler. Now, today, concerns persist about military politicization, Trump's use of troops in 2020, the Pentagon purges, which I don't really care about, and far-right infiltration. That's the issue. Far-right infiltration in police and military. And at this point, can you even call it infiltration? It's not infiltration. It's just the police and the military. And I know the military, that's a little bit more difficult because there's a whole lot more people in the military. But still, the ideology is right-wing and fascist. So if you have willingly joined an organization or an institution that has an ideology and a strategy that is right-wing, fascist, and repressive, then guess what that makes you? Guess what that makes you? You're not just a cop, and you're not a good cop either. You're a fascist pig because you have joined the fascist pig institution, period. So it remains to be seen, in my estimation, if there will be any more Smedley Butlers to emerge from the current military. And honestly, we don't even need a whole nother one of him. We just need enough soldiers to put their weapons down and walk away. Seriously. I really do think we just need enough soldiers to put their shit down, take their DOD badge, turn it in, and go home. Get out. Turn in your badge as an agent of US imperialism. Join the side of humanity again. I don't think we need any Smedley Butlers because we all know what this government is doing with the military domestically and internationally. No, now we just need people to walk the fuck away. What that looks like, how we get people to do that, that's why you have to be in an organization to talk with people about it and gain the experience from the people who have done it. Because what I'm actually talking about is not something that is foreign to us, Black radicals. We've done this before. Or the Vietnam era, all of those soldiers, Black, Indigenous, Asian, poor white soldiers who realized, I'm not doing this, and would go AWOL. Or they would just, they would do things to their commanding officers in the field of battle. Things would happen. You have to read a book called Bloods by, what is that man's name? Terry. Somebody look up the author of the book Bloods for me and tell me what the author's name is, because I can't remember. Book is right in my bookshelf. I just can't remember the author's name, but you should read that book. So, okay. So in 1933, there was no direct coup plot. There was a plot, but it was exposed. January 6th was a full attempted insurrection, right? And there's no evidence of a coordinated elite-backed coup. Elite, again, these are somebody else's words, not mine, like the business plot. But for us to believe that the people who were involved in January 6th were a bunch of working class and poor white people, I don't understand what's wrong with you. Why do you think that? Them working class and poor white people can't afford to go nowhere, just like we can't afford to go nowhere. So these people could not have rented buses. That was the petty bourgeois white people. That was the petty bourgeois class of white people up here on January 6, 2020. 2021, rather. That was them. Not 2020. You know what year that was. My numbers, my poor brain. So just as a little aside, I got I was able to go back to a good therapist, found another good therapist, because good God, Lord Jesus. Um, and she gave me my diagnosis, and I'm just like, are you going to institutionalize me? Capitalism messes with us all, but when you have to deal with life, just regular life stuff, under capitalism, it really does a number on you. So, look, I'm not, please forgive my momentary memory lapses, because I have a lot of them. But yeah, it's just, I'm working that out. So, okay. Whatever year that January 6th thing was, that was a whole attempt at insurrection. And these were not working class and poor white people. Were there some there? Yeah, sure. But most of those folks had some money. Most of those people absolutely had a little bit of money. They were business owners. They're the white petty bourgeoisie. That I'm not going to say that right-wing think tanks, organizations, whatever, didn't pay for some of that transfer. Sure, they did. But did they pay to orchestrate the whole thing? No, I don't believe they did. I'm open to be wrong, though. But at the same time, so what? So what if they did? So the point is, in 1933, somebody had enough principles to expose the damn plot to make sure it didn't happen. That didn't happen in January 6th. They were texting plans on Signal. They were emailing and texting each other. They were doing shit on 4chan and Reddit. It was all on social media. It was all on the internet. And the FBI knew, the Department of Justice knew, everybody knew. Nobody said a damn thing to stop a damn thing. That's the difference between what was being planned in 1933 and what is being done now. Because now the capitalist class may have finally gotten their coup. Now, back in 1933, there was some institutional resistance. Some Republicans in the courts and the military did not want to get involved in this business plot. And as a matter of fact, when the business plot in 1933 was exposed, a lot of people kind of laughed at it. They didn't think it was real. And then Congress didn't actually do an investigation into it after they had hearings. Right? So that's kind of why this history kind of disappeared, fizzled away, because people didn't take it seriously. It was laughed at intentionally. Right? Because who reported on the plot being exposed? The same media that called FDR a socialist. The same media that was owned by the capitalists who were plotting the plot. Oh my gosh. So today, you got Trump using the military, using the military in 2016 and threatening to use the military now. We honestly don't know what this military will do if Trump deploys them domestically. We don't know, and we need to admit that we don't know. because that's a very big deal. Also, in 1933, institutions were weaker than they are now. This is why there weren't a lot of colleges and universities that were getting involved in like repressing students in the 30s, but because there weren't that many of them, and even though they were elite, some of them that existed, they did not have as much power as they do now. Today, well, you see what's happening today. That is the impact of capitalism on institutions that are supposed to be providing a public good. All right, so in the 1930s, also, fascism was rising globally, and it is doing the same today. So the business plot in 1933 reflected corporate control or corporate dictatorship panic about New Deal reforms. That's all the New Deal was. It wasn't socialism, it was just reform. It was just some nice progressive reforms that we still benefit from today, which is why the current president and his fascist friends want to destroy it, because like the Civil Rights Act and all of the civil rights era legislation that was passed, conservatives, fascists, the right wing, and even the so-called moderate Democrats, the neoliberals, they have been trying to get rid of that legislation since the minute it was signed. The same thing with the New Deal. Same thing with these New Deal programs. They have always wanted to get rid of Social Security. They know it's not socialism, but they hate it anyway. So while today's threats stem from what some would call populist authoritarianism and corporate influence over politics, well, I'm sorry, that's fascism. You can call it whatever else you want, but in my mind, it's fascism. The risk of democratic backsliding is real. What democratic? There's not. So this is something that I pulled from just a couple of different places. So it is a bunch of weird stuff from people who have bizarre ideas about what this country really is or is not. But the point that they made about the lessons to be learned from 1933 are important, because there needs to be vigilance against both economic oligarchy and anti-democratic movements. And that includes anti-democratic movements from the Democratic Party. So I want to talk a little bit more about what Smedley Butler did in other countries that makes this so important. So the other side of Butler's legacy is in Haiti. He says, the author of this book, Jonathan Katz, said that he moved there to be a correspondent for the Associated Press. And he learned that to Haitians, they know who Smedley Butler is, and they hate him. Why? Because he's remembered there as the most michan, corrupt or evil of all the Marines. He helped lead the U.S. invasion of Haiti in 1915 and played a singular role in setting up an occupation that lasted nearly 2 decades. Butler also instigated a system of forced labor, the corvée, in which Haitians were required to build hundreds of miles of roads for no pay. What's that, y'all? What's that called? And were killed or jailed if they did not comply. For people who say we have nothing to do with Africans in other parts of the world, if you do not believe that our DNA connects us to those people, and it does, but even if you don't believe that, if that's not good enough for you, the fact that the US government sent its agents and its military with our money to other countries and imposed systems of slavery, exploitation, oppression, land theft, rape, torture, mass murder on other people who look like us, who are African, who are genetically connected to us. and other people who are varying shades lighter than us with different languages in different countries, if that is not a good enough connection to people struggling against this system around the rest of the world, I don't know what else. I don't know what else to say. I honestly, I have nothing else. What? I don't see how we can be angry at people who are still to this day suffering from the horror that Smedley Butler imposed upon their countries as the tip of the spear for the United States government, using our tax dollars, using your mama and them, your grandmama and them, your great grandmama and them tax dollars to go over to Haiti and enslave those people. Our tax dollars. Okay, you don't think, take Smedley Butler out of it and just pretend that instead of just a bunch of individual Marines, it's a bunch of our individual dollars over there enslaving people, because that's who paid for it. We paid for this government to go over there. Now, that's not what we intended our money to be used for, but that is what this government used our tax dollars to do. Aside from that being our connection to other people around the world, the connected struggle against this evil imperialist system, I mean, damn, don't you feel any kind of responsibility to at least say to other people, shit, I'm sorry, I didn't realize this is what our government did to y'all, and y'all are still suffering from this, and that is the reason some of you have to immigrate somewhere, because of what this government is still doing to deprive you of a decent life, of the ability to even survive in your countries. Damn, I did not know we were this deep in that. I apologize. What can we do to help? All right. So Jonathan Katz says he goes to Haiti. He realizes Haitians know who Smedley Butler is, and they knew what he was doing. The Haitians today. He wrote this book, by the way, in 2022, or the book was published in 2022, I think. So he writes that Haitians saw this forced labor, or what they call the corvée. They saw it for what it was: slavery. And they were enraged because what did the Haitians do? They freed themselves from enslavement and French colonialism over a century before Smedley Butler and the U.S. Marines showed up with our tax dollars. So these facts don't make a dent in the mainstream narrative of U.S. history. That's why I do these shows, because I know you don't know, because I didn't know. When I was in high school, I didn't learn any of this. None of this. Didn't learn any of it in college. So that's why I do this. Most Americans prefer to think of ourselves, or themselves, sorry. Most Americans prefer to think of themselves as plucky heroes. Oh, we're the heroes. We're the good guys. The rebels who toppled the empire. Americans do not realize that they're the fucking stormtroopers. America is the Death Star. U.S. textbooks, and more importantly, novels, video games, monuments, tourist sites, movies, where most people encounter versions of American history, are more often about the Civil War or World War II, the struggles most easily framed in black and white, right, wrong, and in which those fighting under the U.S. flag had the strongest claims to being on the side of good. And that's kind of questionable, because the narrative about World War II, we know that's bullshit. You know, the narrative about World War II that you get in the United States is garbage, because the United States did not defeat the Nazi army. The U.S. did not defeat Nazi Germany. The Soviet Red Army did. But you will never hear that in any outlet, any show. You're never going to read that in any book. You're not going to, nobody involved in media in the US in any way is ever, ever going to admit that. How do I know? Because they have never admitted it since it actually happened. So, this is why we have a whole bunch of movies in this country about America being the heroes of World War II when they weren't. It's not okay, anyway. So, imperialism, on the other hand, is a foreign sounding word. That's why people don't like it. I don't know what that means. Well, okay, let me tell you what it means. I don't know. It probably means socialism. Okay. It brings up images, if it brings up any images at all, of redcoats terrorizing Boston, or British officials in linen suits sipping gin and tonics in Bombay. The idea that the United States, which is billed as a country founded in rebellion against empire, and they just leave out the whole genocide of the indigenous and the enslavement of the Africans part, but a country that is supposedly founded in rebellion against empire could have colonized and conquered other peoples. Well, that seems anathema to everything we're taught that America is supposed to stand for. Although, seriously, I don't understand how people who know the true depth of the evil of how this country was founded could believe this BS. I know most people believe it because we're actually not taught the truth about how this country was founded in anybody's school curricula. Genocide of indigenous people is framed as a war, right? As if indigenous people had no right to defend themselves from an invading force that encroached upon their land and dared them to challenge the interlopers. It wasn't a war. These people committed settler colonial violence, stole their land to steal their land. A bunch of foreign invaders that move into the land, start killing the people already here to get rid of them so they can take their land. It's nation building by genocide. That's what settler colonialism is. And then what the US did to Haitians, they had already practiced on our ancestors right here during slavery. So when the U.S. seized its first inhabited overseas colonies in 1898, some people were proud. I am, as I expected I would be, a pretty good imperialist. Who said that? Theodore Roosevelt. He said that to a British friend while on safari in East Africa in 1910. Oh, what happened not too long before that involved the continent of Africa? Oh my. Okay, but as the costs of full-on annexation became clear and control through influence and subterfuge became the modus operandi of the US empire, American leaders reverted seamlessly back to Republican rhetoric. The denial deepened during the Cold War. In 1955, the historian William Appleman Williams, that really is his name, William Appleman Williams, he wrote, quote, "One of the central themes of American historiography is that there is no American empire," end quote. Basically, he's just saying that's one of the ways American historians lie. They tell you that there's no such thing as an American empire. It doesn't exist. And that was essential for the conflict against the Soviet Union to play out the way it was played out. Reagan could only call the Soviet Union the evil empire if Americans did not know that America is a damn empire. Whew. So the U.S. overthrew governments. That's the narrative. The U.S. overthrew regimes. The U.S. defended legitimate governments. The governments that the U.S. overthrew were expansionist. And the U.S. only went abroad in defense of freedom. That was the narrative. That was the narrative then. It's the narrative now. As long as the United States seemed eternally ascendant It was easy to tell Americans that the global dominance of U.S. capital and the unparalleled reach of the U.S. military had been coincidences. Well, I don't know how the military got, I don't know, it just had to be done, but that doesn't have anything to do with the spread of capitalism, nothing at all. It has everything to do. Everything. People believe that America's rise as a cultural and economic superpower was natural. This is where this whole, divinely blessed by God bullshit comes in. These people really believe, some of these folks really do believe that this country is as rich and as powerful as it is because God blessed this country to it's just the way the Lord is blessing us. The Lord is not blessing these coups, motherfuckers. He's not. The Lord is not blessing the genocides. He's not blessing the land thefts. He's not blessing the backing of so-called opposition forces. He ain't blessing NED and USAID. He ain't blessing the CIA. He ain't blessing the School of the Americas. I trust you. I promise you, he is not. Nothing that this country has amassed, no resources, no military bases, no foreign influence, nothing. Capital, that nothing they have amassed have they gotten honestly. They have gotten nothing through a mutual diplomacy. Not from countries in the global South, they haven't. From the European countries, yeah, sure. So that's where the Marshall Plan comes in, right? Now I'm thinking about all these weird things in my head. The Marshall Plan, I think, is a good example of this difference in the relationship between the U.S. engages with some countries and how, or non-European European countries, and how they engage with European countries. Because now Germany was supposed to be the great evil that was about to eat the world during the Nazi era, right? Was that not true? Was that the whole reason why it was supposedly a world war, but it was really, the imperialist war number 2? But what did the U.S. do after the war against the greatest evil this planet has ever seen? The U.S. bailed them out economically. And the U.S. government, again, our tax dollars, the tax dollars of the descendants of enslaved people, the tax dollars of indigenous people, the descendants of the survivors of the near genocide of indigenous people, the descendants of Vietnam refugees who were treated like shit when they got here, and most of whom are still poor. This is what I think people don't understand about a lot of immigrants from other countries who come here. If they come here as refugees from a conflict, they are poor. Most of the immigrants who come here are also poor. There is a very small percentage of immigrants who come here who are actually wealthy, who come here the quote unquote right way. Because do you know what the right way to immigrate entails? Our comrade Claudia O'Brien Moscoso, she talked about it on a Remix Morning Show yesterday. She talked about how long it took her to get her her documentation, her citizenship. 30 years. Like it was like 20 or 30 years or something like that. And I cannot imagine the amount of money. Like, you have to pay for attorneys. You have to pay application fees, and the fees for the applications, they're not like college admission application. They're not like $50 and $75. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to fill out some of these forms. Or however many years it took. Yeah, she's only 29. So however long she was saying it took, it was years. It was years. It was somebody, I can't remember who was talking about it, took them 30 years to finally get their citizenship. But that is usually how long it takes. And I think maybe she was using that as an example, but she was saying that yes, her process, the process for her getting her paperwork took years and a lot of money. And then she knew people that it took them 30 years and a lot more money. So even the people who have money, by the time they get all of that process wrapped up, they ain't got none. They ain't got none no more. By the time they get their documents and they're like, okay, you can come to the United States now. They're like, well, I can't afford the plane ticket now. There is a very small percentage of people who are able to afford to apply for an H-1B visa. Those visas are paid for by somebody else. Most of those people are students who cannot, they don't have them. We don't understand how the system works, and we are hating people that we don't understand are being exploited by the system on both sides of the thing, and we are just heaping onto those people. Good grief. Anyway, so states around the world understand that the United States to them is a bully. And this is what Smedley Butler realized when he went to Haiti. He went to Haiti and he was, I'm sorry, not Smedley Butler, Jonathan Katz. When he went to Haiti, he was confronted with the fact that Haitians are still dealing with the continued fallout of what the United States did in 1915 when Smedley Butler took his ass and the Marines over there invading Haiti for the United States. To this day, and he wrote this in a book that was published in 2022. So today, what is going on in Haiti is a result of what Smedley Butler did. How is that not related to us? How are we not connected to that? So the global dominance of U.S. capital and the spread of U.S. militarism, simultaneous, symbiotic. One could not be done without the assistance of the other. All right? Not a coincidence. And people believe that, this country has established itself as the power that it is through, individual choices that were freely made. People in other countries made the choices they made. No, they didn't. No, the US imposed things without being invited onto people in other countries. And people in this country also really believe that people around the world want this endless supply of Americanism. Like people want Marvel superheroes and McDonald's fries. And no, what people around the world want is not Americanism. People around the world never wanted America's products, not to this degree. What people want is respect. Respect for their sovereignty in their land, the sovereignty of their land, and their right to self-determination. To choose their leaders for themselves, to lead their countries in the way that they want their countries to be led without the interference of the US government. What people around the world want was not American French fries, but freedom from American imperialism. So in the years between Butler going to Haiti in that first imperialist incursion, or maybe that was a second, excuse me, Smedley Butler's military career started in Haiti, the place where the United States overseas empire truly began. Haiti and Guantanamo Bay. See the connections now? See them? Okay. His last overseas deployment in China from 1927 to 1929 gave him a front row seat to both the start of the civil war between the communists and the nationalists in China and the slowly materializing Japanese invasion of China that would ultimately open World War II. Okay? Excuse me. In the years between, Butler blazed a path for U.S. empire, helping seize the Philippines and the land for the Panama Canal. Seized with the military, with the U.S. Marines, seized. Invading and helping plunder Honduras, Nicaragua, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, and more. Butler was also a pioneer of the militarization of police. I'm just going to sit here quietly and let y'all catch up, because I'm going to say it again. Smedley Butler was a pioneer of the militarization of police. How? First, spearheading the creation of client police forces across Latin America, then introducing those tactics to U.S. cities during a 2-year stint running the Philadelphia police during Prohibition. Woo! Hey, Daddy, what's going on? My daddy's in the chat. Oh, wait, this means I can't cuss a whole lot. Hey, Daddy, love you too. Yeah, I'm actually trying to cuss less, so I was gonna cuss less anyway. But now that my dad is in the chat, yeah, I'm gonna cuss a lot less. So, but yes, for a time, Smedley Butler ran the Philadelphia police during Prohibition. So every movie you see of the mob fighting the police over Prohibition, and you see the police busting up the kegs of beer and liquor and wine and all that kind of stuff, you know why all those movies are in New York? because Smedley gave the Philadelphia police machine guns from the Marine Corps. And won't nobody busting up some kegs with some sledgehammers. Not in Philadelphia, they were not. Yet, Smedley Butler would spend the last decade of his life trying to keep the forces of tyranny and violence that he had unleashed abroad from consuming the country he loved. And this is the problem I have with Americanism. It's this isolationist garbage. Because when people talk about isolationism, they always talk about it in the context of war and militarism, and okay, but isolationism is a complete kind of thing, but it's also very much ideological. Isolationism is connected in my mind to this rugged individualism thing, but also this American exceptionalism. Like we are unique and uniquely blessed by God. There's nothing in that book that said God blesses a whole nation, not even Israel, not even the nation of Israel, because Israel as a nation didn't exist. God was talking to a person in the Bible whose name was Israel. He was not talking about a whole white supremacist, Jewish supremacist country that was illegally established by stealing somebody else's land and genociding those people. That is not in the book. But isolationist is also about nativism, about prioritizing the needs of people who live in this place and only people who live in this place. And normally that would seem like it would make sense, right? Because like when I was married, well, I'm still technically still married, but when my husband was alive and our dog was alive, my little family, I don't care what y'all did outside this. I needed to make sure that my husband was happy. I needed to make sure that my dog was happy. My husband needed to make sure that I was happy, right? Our primary concern was the people in this house. But see, you can do that with your family to a certain extent. Because if I know my neighbor across the street, if I know that something I did caused the death of their dog, I can't continue to be like, well, I don't care what happens to you. That sounds like a you problem. No, then things things that involve me do impact other people. So now I can't continue to be isolationist and say, well, the only thing I'm concerned about is what happens in this house. No, I have to be concerned about how the people in this house engage with the people who live around this house and how we impact their lives. Because I don't want people come knocking on my door, with a dead dog in their hand. Look at what you did. And then we're going to be fighting. And then we talked about how I don't like to fight, but how I will fight last week. And we don't want that. Right? So you have to be sure that you are engaging with the people around you in a way that is mutually beneficial, responsible, and respectful of other people. You don't have to agree with everything other people do. You don't have to like what they do, but you just have to treat people decently like a human being. And the United States does not do that to other countries. It doesn't do that. Smedley Butler was not doing that. And in the last decade of his life, he realized that he didn't do that, but he only realized it because he saw the things that he sowed around the world coming home, coming back here. And as much as he was fine with doing it to other people who look like you and me around the world, he couldn't stand the thought of it being done, I'm sure, to nice white Americans. Now, I'm not saying Butler was a racist. I'm just saying. I don't think he was all that concerned about us. Okay. Let me not get in any more trouble than I'm already in, probably. So this is why I have a problem with people who are like, we have to be self-interested. No, I don't have to. There's no the world, other people in other countries do not live disconnected from other people in other countries. We don't realize this because we don't go anywhere. And we don't go anywhere because we pretty much can't afford to go anywhere. And we can't afford to go anywhere because we're kept that way. So we never find out that these things are true, that people around the world do not live disconnected with other people. People around the world do see themselves as part of a global community. Yes, they are proud of their country and they want to do good for their citizens. I mean, China has a whole 20-year shared prosperity plan where they are working on improving the material conditions and closing the inequality gaps that they're seeing in their country and improving life for all Chinese over the next 20 years. And they have already met more than half of their goals. So it's not that countries don't have self-interest baked into their policies. Of course they do. But self-interest does not mean lack of concern for how we exist in the rest of the world. The United States operates like that. But this country takes it further. We declare that we don't care that other people around the world are suffering. And then we go on to say that we don't care that other people around the world are suffering using our tax dollars. And then we turn around and demand that the government pay us for whatever. That we talk about, we don't care about the genocide in Gaza, but we expect the government that financed the genocide in Gaza to give us health care. Are you out of your mind? How you gonna make two separate arguments? You think this government is going to give you Medicare for all or reparations at the same time that you don't care that this government is giving the Pentagon as much of our money as it is giving, and the Pentagon loses to the tune of trillions of dollars. And what they don't lose, they use to drop bombs on people around the world who look like you and me, who vote for people to lead them that this government doesn't like. What business is it of this government? Who other people vote for? None, unless the capitalists who run this government want to make sure they have access to the resources in those countries so they can make money off of them. So this is why it is important for the capitalist class to keep people both ignorant about foreign policy and how important it is to our material conditions here, but it is also important for the capitalist class to keep us at each other's throats domestically and to keep us hating people around the world. You're playing their game. You are playing their game by their rules. Every time you say, I don't care what happens to these other people. Well, they're communists, so they're led by a dictator, so he must be evil. So, yes, the US must destroy him and his country. Oh, the US government said China is spying on us, so we must go to war with them. This government has been lying to you about everything since this government has existed. But you still believe these people. And it's weird to me that many people who say these things about not caring about other people and believing what this US government says will also say that they know the US government has lied about all of these coups and military interventions that they said they didn't have anything to do with, that we find out now 10, 20 years later that they were behind or that they funded. So the same people who know that the U.S. government lied about Vietnam, lied about how this country was established, lied about slavery, they still ain't told the truth about everything they've done to us during slavery. Lied about everything about the very history of this country. How do you know that this government lies about the history of this country, but somehow you believe everything they say about everybody else? That makes no damn sense. And I can't even blame the government on that. That's you. That is honestly you choosing to hate other people because this evil empire told you to. So that was the situation with Smedley Butler. He was fine. He was fine spreading that good old U.S. imperialist democracy to the Black and browns and indigenouses around the world, crushing people underfoot under the military, spreading Americanism in that way. But when the chickens came home to roost, then he realized, what have I done? I have to stop this. And again, he watched the rise of fascism in Europe with alarm. In 1935, Butler published a short book about the collusion between business and the armed forces. And that book is called War is a Racket. I think you can still get it. The warnings in that, it's a small book, would be refined and amplified years later by his fellow general turned president, Dwight D. Eisenhower, whose speechwriters would call what Smedley Butler talked about in his book, War is a Racket. Eisenhower's speechwriters called it the military-industrial complex. So Dwight Eisenhower's famous comment, beware the military-industrial complex, actually came from Smedley Butler. In 1935, later that year, Butler would go further, declaring in a series of articles for a radical magazine, quote, only the United Kingdom has beaten our record for square miles of territory acquired by military conquest. Our exploits, he called them, exploits. Genocide is what it was, but he said our exploits against the American Indian, against the Filipinos, against the Mexicans, and against Spain are on a par with the campaigns of Genghis Khan, the Japanese in Manchuria, and the African attack on Mussolini. Now, again, you're not going to disparage my relatives. Ain't nobody attacked Mussolini. Mussolini needed to have his ass kicked, and guess who kicked it? The Ethiopians. Anyway, Butler was not just throwing stones. In that article, he repeatedly called himself a racketeer, a gangster, and enumerated his crimes. This is what he did. He said it. I helped make Mexico and especially Tampico, look up Tampico. You look it up. Safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National City Bank boys to collect revenues in. That's why Guantanamo is what I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefit of Wall Street. I helped purify Nicaragua for the International Banking House of Brown in 1909 to 1912. That was Brown Brothers. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for American sugar interests in 1916. I helped make Honduras right for American fruit companies in 1903. Didn't we just talk about the United Fruit Company? In China in 1927, I helped see to it that Standard Oil went its way unmolested. During those years, Smedley Butler himself says, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. I was rewarded with honors, medals, promotions. Looking back on it, I feel I might have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was operate in 3 city districts. We Marines operated on 3 continents. Come the fuck on. I'm sorry, I had to cut. What the Butler was telling a messier story than the ones Americans like to hear about themselves, but we ignore the past at our peril. How many times I got to say that? This is Jonathan Katz, the author of this book on Butler and this plot, speaking now. Americans may not recognize the events Butler referred to in his confession, but America's imperial history is well remembered in the places we invaded and conquered, where leaders and elites use it and shape it to their own ends to this day. Nowhere is more poised to use its colonial past to its future advantage than China, in which U.S. forces, twice led by Butler, intervened at will in the early 20th century. This country has always hated China, always. As they embark on their own, according to Jonathan Katz, projects across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And some people would call these projects imperial, but imperialism is about control. Imperialism is literally influencing one country, a stronger country, a more powerful country, influencing another country that they perceive to be less powerful, more weak, influencing them through control, to control them through either what some would call diplomacy, but we in the Black Alliance for Peace call it soft power. Right? Where it's not the military coming in. It's not them sending Smedley Butler and the Marines in. They'll send the State Department official in. They will send the National Endowment for Democracy official in. They'll send an embassy official there. They'll send what they call the USAID official. Let's set up an office in your country. Yeah, USAID office, and we'll just talk about, the programs that your country needs to feed your people, to build some schools, some hospitals, and they might build 1 or 2, National Endowment for Democracy. Oh, let's set up an office here, and we can help some of your people establish civil society organizations, and we'll help get them organized, and we'll finance some of their efforts. And through these projects propaganda against popular, progressive, or left-leaning leaders that the people want to vote for them and lead for them, they begin to be disparaged by these NED, USAID, US imperialist assets in these other countries. And then money from the US government, from the taxpayers, gets given to these civil society organizations that are shaped into opposition organizations against these progressive leaders who are rising among the people. And then those forces that are cultivated by these US assets are unleashed on the new government of that progressive or leftist leader that the people voted for. That's how this works. That's imperialism. That's one form of imperialism. That's the soft power. Now, when soft power doesn't work, lawfare doesn't work, then the US sends in the military. But today, the US doesn't send the Marines in. They won't send the Smedley Butlers in. They will just send troops from the nearest AFRICOM, the nearest US command base, Pacificom, AFRICOM, Southcom, CENTCOM, Eurocom, and Spacecom now. Yeah. There won't be, they won't send the Marines like they did in Grenada, but they will ship arms, bombs, and send drones to help those opposition forces that they cultivated topple the progressive or leftist government that the people just voted for. That's the other end of imperialism. That's the bloody hand of imperialism. That's the iron glove of imperialism. Is like the hug that you don't want from capitalism, right? It is capitalist forces, the dictatorship of finance capital, operating through government control to extend its influence on other countries, either through diplomacy or by military force. So it is not negotiation. It's really not diplomacy. It is not entering into a mutually beneficial relationship with these other countries and these other countries' leaders. Nope. It is, you will do what the United States says, or we will kill you. You will give us access to your resources to do whatever we want with them. You will let us exploit your population to mine those resources. And you are not going to interfere in the operation of business to do their business any way they want to. And if you push back in any way, we will kill you. We will use your own military to kill you. We will train your military on how to kill you. We will give them weapons to kill you with from the United States. Your own people using US weapons to kill you. That's what we're going to do. And that's what this government has done. That is what it continues to do. That is imperialism. So the United States does that. The UK did that. China, no. Nope. When the United States government says that other countries like Russia, like China, and not to say that they did not have some of that kind of imperial activity in their earlier stages, like in Russia with the Tsars, yes. Yes. Before the British Empire, there was an Ottoman Empire. So yes, imperialism has been practiced by other people other than the US and the British. But Russia is not an imperialist. They're not doing what the US is doing. China is not an imperial. They're not doing what the US is doing. How many Chinese or Russian military bases are there around the world? How many American military bases surround Russia and China? If you answer that question honestly, then you have your answer to whether Russia and China are imperialist or not. Because empires need military bases all over the places that they want to take control of, and they have to have those military bases there to keep that control over those people. So the country that is the biggest military imperialist power in the world, that's the country with the most military bases around the world. That's the United States. So, Chinese and other countries, Russia, Nicaragua, Haiti, Honduras, they all tell the story of U.S. imperialism and its impact on not just their country, but their history, their culture, their traditions, their environment, everything. Everything. The way those countries developed was interrupted by U.S. imperialism. That's why they tell the history, because the story of U.S. imperialism in their countries explains the interruption in the country's development. In most of those countries, China has a slightly different story, and I really do have to dig into the historical the history of China. I don't know as much about it as I would like to, but I'm learning more, and it's very, very interesting. But I think it's something we should know. But I think we should know the history of all countries as much as we can know, so that we understand how interconnected we are. Because I really kind of don't understand how we don't want to be connected to other people around the world, but the capitalists are. Like the people who are oppressing us are absolutely in solidarity with people like them around the world doing the same thing to people like us. And here we are, oppressed by that international coalition of finance capital dictators. We are being oppressed by them, but here we are sitting around talking about, I ain't got nothing to do with them niggas over there. When the capitalists are all like, okay, what are the capitalists in the UK saying? What are they doing? Ask Steve Bannon to go over to Yugoslavia and talk to the capitalists there. Have Jared Kushner go over to Israel and talk to our Zionist friends over there. 7:13. All right, let me wrap this up. So what does this all mean? To those who did not know or have ignored America's imperial history, people think that Trump is some alien force. Okay, this is why people say stupid stuff like, this is not who we are. Yes, it is. Yeah, Trump is y'all's. Y'all produced Trump. Trump is y'all's baby. Or that the implosion of this presidency has made it, or people hope the implosion of this presidency is going to make it safe to slip back into comfortable liberalism, which is exactly what is going to happen. That's exactly what's going to happen, because that's what happened the first time. Because this article that I'm reading from was written after Trump's first administration. The exact same thing is going to happen. He's going to leave, whether he finishes the full term. I don't see it happening, but that he could. Whether he finishes the whole term or whether he doesn't, he's going to leave, and people are going to be like, "Oh, great, we can get the Democrats back now. Things can go back to normal." And y'all still going to be broke and disenfranchised and still begging them capitalists for reparations they ain't going to give you. But the movement Trump built, a movement that stormed the Capitol, tried to overturn an election, and as Jonathan Katz wrote those words in 2022, still dreamed of reinstalling him by force, and here he is now, president, and doing all of the things that fascists dream of doing. All of this stuff that Trump is doing now, I want you to understand that the capitalists wanted to do all this in 1933. This has been the plan all along. They never abandoned these plans. They were just waiting for a perfect opportunity and the perfect representative to get it done for them. Project 2025 is not some new boogeyman. Project 2025 was cooked up before 1933. And this Maguire person finally wrote the stuff down and got the pieces together and brought the plan to Smedley Butler, who had some conscience left, who had some morality left, who had some principles left, enough to say, oh, I can't let what I did around the world happen here. So, look, what is going on now is a product of greed, bigotry, and denialism that are woven into the structure of US global supremacy from the very beginning. Forces, Jonathan Katz says, and that I agree with, forces that now threaten to break apart not only the empire, but this society. And my question is, folks, honestly, my question really is, what are we going to do about it? Like, now that you know a little bit of this history, and it is not even everything. I've just talked for 2 hours and 16 minutes about this one topic. And I hope that you have learned some things that you didn't know. I hope that you have some phrases and some names that you can go look up now. Ooh, it's hot in here. It's getting hot in here. I cannot take off all my clothes yet. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it with this information that you have? Are you going to continue the denialism? You don't care about what happens around the world. You don't care about, what happens in Haiti. Them people ain't got nothing to do with you. Well, if they didn't worship voodoo, maybe they wouldn't have it. So now I hope that those of you who might be of the Christian persuasion, who have thought that, the reason the Haitians are having all these problems is because of the voodoo. The voodoo is the United States. And the Haitians were not worshiping the United States. Satan sent the United States military to Haiti. It wasn't the Haitians practicing voodoo. Y'all don't know nothing about voodoo to be disparaging voodoo the way you do. Don't know nothing about it. And you just, these people talking about, well, the earthquake happened because of voodoo, and that was Pat Robertson. And I knew a bunch of Christians who were saying that shit. Woo, the fights I almost got into in church. I don't have any sense. So it wasn't voodoo. It's not voodoo. That's the reason the Haitians are still suffering the way they are. It's US imperialism and their imperialist friends in Canada and in Brazil. Okay? So what y'all gonna do? You gonna organize now that you see that we are connected to the rest of the world, whether we like it or not. Do you understand? We're connected to the rest of the world because the government of the country that we live in and that we fund goes around the rest of the world, causing misery, chaos, and death for other people. We are connected to the rest of the world. This situation in this country is our responsibility because we did not want to know this history, especially if it was being delivered by a bunch of Black leftist, Marxist, Leninist, communist, socialist. You didn't want to hear it when we told you. You didn't want to hear it when Malcolm told you. You can't understand Mississippi if you don't understand the Congo, and you will never understand the Congo if you do not understand Mississippi. You didn't want to listen to them. You didn't want to listen to Martin when he celebrated the independence of Ghana in a sermon in his church on a Sunday, and talking about the need for international solidarity among Africans because he's seen a liberation struggle against colonial repression and bigotry be successful, and he wanted that for his people here, and he understood that we have an example now. Let's connect with these people so that we can help each other from the pulpit in his church. And you didn't listen to him. There is still time. Although I argue that today, I don't think we have as much time as we had when Malcolm and Martin and Ella Baker, who also went to Ghana, I believe, Claudia Jones, other men and women who ran before us in this struggle told us, and I'm just talking about the quote unquote American or the blacks that Americans are familiar with, because Claudia Jones was Trinidadian. But struggling against imperialism because they understood how dangerous it was for Black people, poor, working class, oppressed peasant people around the world, but also the horrifying contradiction that Black people in this country lived in, right in the middle of, understanding that it's our tax dollars that fund the degradation, oppression, and mass murder of our relatives around the world. So it is our responsibility to stop it. So I'm going to end this show saying what I say all the time. The fuck y'all gonna do now? You gonna keep complaining about organizers and how you don't like organizers, or why you don't like organizations, or why you don't want to be in an organization, and organizations hurt your feelings, or are you finally going to realize that all of us are up against it now? All of us. And we do not have any more time for the infighting, for the petty beefs, for the I don't like this one because they eat meat. I don't like that one because they don't eat meat. I don't like this one because it's a man dressed as a woman. I don't like this one because it's a man married to a man. Shut up. None of those issues are why you are broke. None of those issues are why you can't get health care. None of those issues are why your kid who was in college on a scholarship just got their scholarship revoked because they have some principle and participated in a demonstration against genocide. And now the university that you trusted your precious peas education to just snatched their scholarship because they stood up against genocide for the humanity of somebody else. What the fuck you gonna do about this country continuing to treat us all like slaves? What you gonna do? I know what I'm doing. I'll keep doing it. My question to you is, what are you going to do besides snarky comments on a live stream? That's all I got for tonight, y'all. Look, stick around because believe it or not, I'm doing another thing at 8 o'clock. I am going to be on with the with Baba Mosi and the UNIA chapter here in the DC area. I'm pretty happy about it. They do a Freedom Friday every Friday. Usually it's at 7. Tonight it's at 8. Thank God, because you see what time it is. But yeah, having a little conversation with them at 8 o'clock. So that's going to be on Facebook. Yeah, I do be working. And you know what I realized real quick before I get always. I have a hard time saying no, not because when people ask me to speak, because not because I love to speak in front of I don't. I actually don't. I don't. I talk too much. And I know I talk too much. And I don't want to. I just like yesterday after the morning show, I was like, I'm not talking to anybody else. I'm not saying anything else. I'm not saying any more words today to another person. Only thing I talked to was the dog and the plants. I got to do that sometimes because people do ask me to talk a lot, to speak a lot, and I do. I do it, but not because I like it. Not because I like being in front of people. Not because I like the attention. I do not. The attention that article is getting. Oh God, I've learned to not read the comments. I post my shit and I just go on about my business now. I don't go back and see what people have to say unless it's on my Facebook page and I know it's my friends. I don't want to engage with people who say nasty things. Go ahead. But I say yes so often because I know time is short. All of the work that we are doing has to be popularized. It has to be publicized. It has to be, consciousness has to be raised. And that can't be done by like sitting in the corner in my house, hoping that people stumble across my videos. Nope, that's not how it gets done. It gets done by getting in front of people and having the conversation. So I usually say yes when people ask me to speak, because it's a part of doing that. And I also do events like we're doing tonight in Baltimore and tomorrow here in DC. I'll be speaking at the panel in DC tomorrow. Next week, I'll be doing some more stuff. I'll be writing more articles. I'll be doing a history rewind on my Patreon because we need to know this history. And I'll be doing another one of these shows Friday. That's why I do what I do, because I'm an organizer, and everything I do contributes to the raising of the consciousness of our people so that we can get organized and fight. I just want to know if we're going to do that or not. Because if you're not going to do it, I can just take a nap. Shit. Get a beer, you know. Anyway, thanks y'all for hanging out with me for this extended period of time. I'll see y'all later. I'll see y'all next week. A luta continua. The struggle continues. Indeed it does. But if we keep fighting, I promise you, I wouldn't do this if I didn't believe it were true. Victoria acerta. Victory is certain. Peace.